Let's start with some of the basics that you'll need to know. In this lesson, we'll discuss using different pencil pressures to create a variety of tones in an artwork, how to create a value scale of 5 tones to use for reference when shading an artwork, and how to use simple shading effectively on an object using just 5 tones. Shading is one of the easiest ways to add depth, contrast, and character and movement to your drawings. Shading captures the shadows and highlights within an image to help make an artwork more realistic and interesting. There's several types of shading and many ways to go about doing it. Here is a range of artist pencils that are from H to B. If you look at them closely, you'll notice that there's a number and a letter, which indicates the grade of pencil and the hardness or lightness of pencil. So if a pencil has an H on it, it indicates that it's a hard pencil. Hard pencils have a light, sketchy line that's very good for drawing and sketching, whereas if you move over to the right-hand side for this particular brand, you'll get into the B range of pencils, which indicates darkness, smudginess, really great for shading. There's a number in front of that letter that indicates the degree of hardness or softness, a low number, 2, 3, or 4, but if you move all the way up to a 9H, you'll get a very, very light line, great for mechanical drawings. Same range when it goes to the B section. 2B, 3B, 4B is a nice, smudgy, dark line. 9B, very intense, very dark, smudgy line. And you'll get to have some favorite pencils as you learn how these pencils work. I do have a couple favorites that I like to use just after years of drawing. I've chosen these as some favorites, especially when shading. I have the 4B, which I like, which is nice and soft and smudgy for lightly shaded areas. The 6B, a little bit darker, and then the 8B, which is pretty intense in darkness, but not as intense as a 9B. So I'd like to show you a couple of marks that these can make. The 4B, as I said, is a nice, smudgy, dark line, and just by using some even pencil pressure, I can get a nice tone just by scribbling back and forth. In contrast, 6B, just right next to that, I'm using the same pencil pressure. It's very slightly darker, it's subtle, but when it's created and placed down next to the 4B in a drawing, it becomes a nice subtle blend. Next, finally, the 8B, using that same pencil pressure, you look at that difference. You can see it is a nice, intense darkness. So it's just a matter of personal preference. As you learn how to shade a little bit more and get comfortable with these pencils, you'll have a personal preference too. All of this stuff that I just showed you, using these soft, nice B shading pencils, can be achieved with a regular number 2 HB, 2HB pencil. There's many different names for the same common pencil that you'll find in a classroom or in your junk drawer at home. This is a good way to draw and shade. However, some of the work is taken away from you if you choose these artist pencils, but it's very easy to achieve a nice result using a regular pencil, which I'll show you. It's just pencil pressure is the difference there. As I had done for this example here, I have used pencil pressure that was the same. I am going to change that up using a regular 2B pencil because I need to get different marks using the same pencil. So here's a light pencil pressure, very similar to what the 4B does. I'm going to press a little bit harder with this pencil, similar to what the 6B does, and even harder. This is similar to what the 8B does. Similar results, however, less work with the artist pencils. So really it's just artist preference and what you have available to you as far as pencils are concerned. One thing to be aware of is if you do have artist pencils and you're using those Bs to get some nice, soft, smudgy tones and values, you will need to sharpen them a little bit more because they tend to dull faster. Next thing I'd like to show you is how to create a value scale using these pencils. A value scale is a helpful tool to use when shading an artwork. A value scale, also known as a grayscale, is a series of spaces that are filled with tints and shades of one color, starting with white or the lightest tint on one end and then gradually changing into the darkest shade or black on the other. There can be hundreds of different shades of gray between black and white. The value scale that we're going to draw is just a small representation of the tones that can be created with your pencil. So I'm going to start with my 8B pencil, one of the darkest and softest and smudgiest of the art pencils. I'm going to start at the right-hand side of this pre-drawn area of blocks. This is going to be our shades of the value scale that we're going to use and there's only going to be 5. So in this area, I am going to apply some pressure, back and forth motion, and just create a dark tone. This is all artists controlling the pressure. You're going to try and press pretty hard without breaking the tip of your pencil. Our goal is to get the darkest tone that we can get. And if you need to go over this a couple times to do it, feel free to go ahead and do so. But just a nice dark tone that will eventually represent the darkest areas of shade and shadow in an artwork. With this same pencil, I'm going to go over to my next square, sort of working backwards here from dark to light. It doesn't really matter as long as you get the gist of what a value scale is. A little bit lighter with pressure. Since I am using the same 8B pencil, I am going to press just a little bit lighter, and my goal here is to get a deep gray tone, but not as gray and deep as in the number 5 of our scale here. I'm going to switch out pencils, grab my 6B, a little bit lighter than an 8B, and fill in my number 3 block here for a medium gray. And then finally, my 4B, this will be my light gray. Our goal is to get a nice light gray tone here. So I'll just number these off 1 through 5. This will give us an idea of the different tones that we're going to be using. So just to reiterate, I use several different pencils to create this value scale. If you want to do that, you certainly can, or else one single pencil with different pencil pressures can absolutely do the same job. You'll have nice results. If you don't want to draw the box like I did, there is one available to you that is pre-drawn in the class materials. A quick note about paper. Any paper will do, however, using computer paper or other non-drawing papers, when you're doing large areas of the same tone, they'll appear flat as opposed to using a nice textured paper or drawing paper like I'm using. Right now I'm using a Strathmore drawing paper with a medium surface. Again, personal preference, but actual drawing papers can actually help you when you're doing your shading to make things look a little bit more realistic and have more depth. Next, we're going to take our value scale and create an object using these 5 tones and shade them in. This next exercise is a great way to practice shading an object using only 5 tones. We will apply the basic 5-tone value scale to a portrait by simplifying the drawing into a paint by numbers approach and shade it in. I found this picture of my dad and I used a computer to simplify it into 5 tones. What I have done is I needed to take this and transfer it onto my drawing paper, and there's a really quick and easy way to do that. Printing it out, take it, flip it over. Somewhat of a mess right now because I have already done what I need to do to it, but I'll show you again. I've taken a piece of charcoal or a nice dark smudgy pencil and just gone over the back of the area. If you want to get the whole entire paper, you can certainly do that. I've just gone around the area that I'm going to need, and very carefully, it's a little bit dusty. You don't want to blow this dust in the air and breathe it in. I took it and flipped it over onto my paper and then taped it down and traced or gone over all of the edges of every single different tone. There's only 5 tones here, so by outlining the darkest area, then the second darkest, the third, and then the fourth, and then finally just the white, you end up with a really nice outline such as this. It does get a little bit tricky around the eyes, those areas that really show nice character and show the personality of the person. Take your time if you're going to do this and outline those different shapes and areas that you see, because it's going to make it a lot easier for you in the long run. We are going to need this photo, even though it's a little bit dirty on the back. What I like to do is take a nice clean piece of paper and put it behind it and tape it, so that way when we pick it up we won't get all smudgy. But we do need to take this and number it to match our value scale tones. So with a pencil right on top of this photo that we have, I'm going to go ahead and number what I think is going to match this value scale. So for instance, number 1 in our value scale is blank. There's nothing there. It's done for us already. This is our areas of number 1s. The lips, the cheeks, the shirt area, all number 1. We don't have to do anything to it. The second lightest area is going to be a number 2. So to the best of your ability, take a look at it, number all of those areas with a 2. The 3, the medium tone, take your pencil, mark down as many 3s as you see. Again, paying attention to those eyes. There's some little tiny areas that you might need to get. The more you drop in there, the easier it's going to be for you in the long run. A little bit here in the ears. Also notice you're going to get a jagged edge when you're printing this out. There's not going to be a perfect line of crisp ending and beginning of one color into another. Simplify it. Make it easy for yourself. These little jagged edges, make straight lines. It's going to look just as good. The almost darkest areas, your 4s, toss those in there. And finally, the blackest, darkest areas are all going to be your 5s. This is going to be the cheat sheet we're going to use for our paint by numbers. So keeping this photo or printout to the side, you do need to look at that and have it handy for when you're shading in your artwork. Here we have the line drawing or the outline. It looks a little strange, it's funny, it's not filled in, it's just outlines. It will look weird, but that's okay, because eventually it's going to be all filled in with different tones. One thing to keep aware of as you're doing this is just a transfer, if you will. These lines are very, very easily smudged. If you look here, I can totally remove that with my finger. Be careful. Your palm or the edge of your hand is going to rub on that, and it'll get a little frustrating. So if you want to, you can outline it a little bit with a H pencil. Remember that H pencil is hard, has a nice, light, but firm, hard line. If you want to outline all that, or just be careful not to lean on your paper, it's a little less frustrating. You will get some little smudgies here and there, and that's when I like to use my kneaded eraser. These are great. This is what it looks like in the package, but once you take it and manipulate it a little bit, a lot of my students think, what's that piece of clay? What are you doing with that? It's actually an eraser, and it's really great. Instead of using this eraser in a back and forth motion, you can dab at your paper and it'll lift off some of those smudgies without interfering with that nice line. You can go back and forth with it, but it was meant to just be dabbed at, and it pulls up some of that pigment really easily. Great tool that an artist should definitely have in their arsenal of materials to use. So I'm going to start from dark to light, just like we did with our value scale. We started with our 5, the darkest shade, and moved all the way up to 1, which is the lightest that we have, which is actually nothing. So I'm going to start with my favorite 8B pencil. This is going to give us the nicest, darkest, smudgiest hue, and I'm going to look at my photo, notice where all the 5s are, and I'm going to fill in as dark as I can without breaking the tip of my pencil, all of the 5s on this drawing. Pay attention to those numbers that you have created and try to give yourself a nice even pencil pressure so you can get a nice lay down of tone. The goal here is to have different separations of color or tone or hue. So for the sake of consistency, I am going to fill in all the 5s that I see first, making them nice and dark and rich. Then I'll go back and add all of my 4s. You can use your 8B pencil and press a little bit lighter, or you can move down to the 6B pencil if you like. Next, add all of the 3s. Lighter in tone, it should match the 3 on your value scale. And then finally the 2s. This is the lightest of